This is chapter 4 of the third book of Athanasius Kircher's treatise on magnetism, entitled, in Greek, Δηλητηρωμαγνητισμός, de Magnetismo Venenorum, on the magnetism of poisons. In this video, I will be reading in translation into English all of the Latin and Greek text in this chapter. I've recently completed this translation, and it is not so edited, so the grammar is still very Latinese. Let's begin. Poison, in this context, is nothing other than a certain productive force, placed into some other body, singularly harmful to the heart, and unlike the entire substance of animal life, directly corrupting it. But what this force is, or of what it consists, is a great dispute and controversy among authors. Some say that poisons act only through an excess of the first qualities, such that some, by intense cold, constrict the heart, stupefy it, and extinguish its vital heat, while others, by intense heat, burn the heart. Some destroy a person through dryness, consuming the vital heat, others through humidity, by rotting and blocking the paths of the body. They therefore conclude that when the heart's motion is taken away by poison, this necessarily happens through some kind of unwholesomeness. But unwholesomeness is only from the discord of the first qualities, by which the whole symmetry of the humors is dissolved. Therefore they infer that the effects of this unwholesomeness cannot be, except from the first qualities inherent in the poisoned thing. On the other hand, if the action of the poison consists solely in the excess of first qualities, then there will be no reason why pure water, pure pepper, distilled wine, spirit of sulfur, and the like could not be counted among poisons and deleterious substances. For water is quite cold, pepper is very hot, and yet these are not poisons. Therefore, in addition to the heat and cold, humidity and dryness, another transient quality is needed, with which intensity those symptoms are produced which are seen in those who ingest poison. For, as Aristotle rightly asserts in the third chapter of his On Species of Animals, there is in seeds a certain creative faculty of the seed, and this is heat, but not fire, nor any such faculty that the spirit that is contained in the seed and in the frothy body, and the nature which is in that spirit corresponds in proportion to the element of the stars. Therefore, poisons do not kill by any kind of coldness or heat, but by a certain cold and heat that is absolutely marvelous, either granted by the stars or rooted in the essence of the body of the universe. And although certain narcotic poisons are found which seem to kill by cold alone, namely opium, mandrake, hyoscyamus, solanum, napellus, yet these do not do so without some other poisonous quality added to them, as those rare and wonderful symptoms of the intoxicated person, which cannot fall into the first qualities, or cold alone, sufficiently demonstrate. Furthermore, we see that poison kills much more quickly than any induced disorder of the humors, as Cornelius Gemma reports to have happened in epidemics. In this way, a certain Ordelafus at Mercurius's place killed those who approached him with the poison with which he was anointed. I do not deny, however, that the first qualities concur, as it were, by means of a disposition to the operation of the poison, and indeed much more in one, less in another. For the fact that Scamaronia, taken inwardly, rarefies, thins, and cuts down, requires the heat, which in fact drives away the sinful humor everywhere collected in itself. But the need of another quality flowing from within, no one will be infected. Moreover, just as there are healthful things, so in a certain proportion there is a varied and manifold abundance of harmful things, which we shall divide into two classes, so that some are natural, others artificial. Natural poisons are again divided into various ways, for some are from minerals, such as arsenic, gold, pigment, antimony, mercury, and the like. Others come from plants, such as all genera of aconite, and narcotics, some of which are poisonous in their entire substance, others in part only, such as the root, seed, or flower. Others, finally, from animals, poisonous, including animals that are poisonous either in whole or in part, which are as innumerable as they are diverse in their mode of action. To these are added poisons which derive their origin from putrefaction or celestial influence, such as epidemic plagues and pestilence. Of the poisons mentioned, some are inhaled, either by inhaling poisonous air, as occurs in contagious diseases, or by the pestilential breath of certain animals. Others require a bite or puncture applied externally, such as venom, injected into a hot wound, spreads. Thus the bites of rabid dogs and other snakes affect us. Others, taken internally, do their work under the guise of food and drink. Which, as the most present of all poisons, they are the most effective kind. For when absorbed, the poison spreads very quickly through to the lungs, into the heart, and the arteries, first weakening the humors, and afterwards the very substance of the limbs. But that which is by external contact is less efficacious, since it has its powers not from the air or spirit, but from a certain humor that carries it through the limbs, as the bite of a rabid dog, which does not infect a man with its breath, but it excretes saliva or poisonous humor into the wound made by the bite, with which it afterwards, when alive, spreads its power throughout the whole body. Other poisons, since they are inherent in a coarser substance, do not destroy it so quickly, as they are weaker. Finally, others taken internally do not work unless first excited by natural heat, such as the poison of narcotics. Therefore, any poison weakened by heat, propagating itself through the internal tissues, greatly infests the spirit, which, when it has its seat in the heart, the source of life, it is not surprising if the animal, after it has died, tends to the interior with us, and our food is contrary to the substance of the whole, as was said above. Section 1. The Magnetism of Antidotes. It may rightly seem paradoxical to some how poison might be cured by poison, and how that which is opposed to our life can also bestow life upon us. For it has been found by frequent, almost daily experience that bites and punctures from poisonous animals are cured by the application of the said animal. This, indeed, I think, cannot happen for any reason, except by the magnetic attraction and confluence of similar things, which we term magnetism. It should be noted that just as roots and plants are accustomed to attract from the earth that which is most in harmony with nature, according to the preceding, so too individual animals are led by a certain natural instinct to that kind of food which is most in harmony with nature for their preservation. Since, therefore, nature has endowed poisonous animals with poison as a certain particular endowment, both for their conspiracies and their defense against other animals, and for purifying the earth and air, the attraction of poison seems to them to be quite natural, without which they cannot live. Hence snakes, by a certain natural appetite, draw whatever on earth is poisonous, contagious, putrid, and harmful to humans, namely that from which they are made, as if it were their nourishment, and by a certain affinity of substance they derive their nourishment from it, not as from man, which you will discover by the following experiment. For if you place a snake, drained of its venom, for a short time into soil imbued with a poisonous quality, you will find that when it, which was previously devoid of all venom, is suddenly completely virulent from the new venom it has absorbed from the ground. Therefore, by this reasoning, the terrestrial vipers, the aquatic dipsas, and the aerial spiders serve a double function. While they take away what is virulent to us and what is beneficial to themselves, they have not done so without a certain wonderful providence of God. In this way, butterflies, moths, and other insects moths, and other insects derive harmful qualities from plants, fruits, and flowers. Thus, as well, all amulets, prophylactics, and antidotes are accustomed to attract poisons. Therefore, it is natural for venomous animals to attract poison by a certain affinity of substance, as if it were similar to itself a friend and a convenient nourishment. Thus it has been found by frequent use that buso, or rubeta, dried in the sun and applied to pestilent tubers, can free those infected from the plague. Namely, the body of the red spider draws in the contagious humor of man as if appropriated and suitable to itself, which nature itself strives to expel from herself as harmful and deadly. For just as these kinds of animals are often found in graves, born from the putrefied moisture of a corpse, so they naturally crave that from which they come, contagious and corrupt in the human body. Thus, when eaten, the flesh of a viper heals a viper's bite, just as a scorpion's flesh heals the bite of a scorpion. There is no other reason for this than that magnetic attraction by which like seeks like. For when someone is bitten by a poisonous animal, the venom soon seeks the innermost tissues by creeping. Therefore, if you give... Hang on, where are we? Therefore, if you give the patient the flesh of a viper that has bitten him to devour, it happens that the venom, having left behind a foreign and incompatible subject, its own, to which it is drawn by a certain natural appetite, it returns to the flesh of the viper, and adheres to it as to a natural subject, the whole army of its members conspiring against a common enemy, and from there expelling it together with the poisonous mass with combined forces. Therefore, the viper flesh is itself a carrier of poison, and therefore, in the preparation of the Theriac, it is the hypostasis of all species, as will be seen later. By this method I saw a certain Cesplarius in Ersone. By this very method I saw a certain Ceplesarius in Ersodia, in Germany, brought to the extreme limits of his life by the bite of a viper. When all antidotes had been used, and no other remedies remained to repel the poison, he was perfectly cured by eating the flesh of the same viper that had bitten him. Thus the scorpion, when applied to a wound, seeks to recover the venom it's poured out with its sting as its own. Such poisons are generally found, I would not say deadly, but entirely salutary to those infected, which should not be undeservedly considered among the greatest miracles of nature. But concerning the nature of the viper, see the learned and elegantly presented work of the most learned and celebrated man, Marcus Aurelius Severinus, which is called the Pythian viper. I will add one thing here more, about the cure of hopeless diseases, which is to be made a dwelling in the cave of snakes, which, because it is so prodigious and exotic, I think it necessary to add here for the pleasure of the curious reader.